You walk into the gym holding a program that promises to confuse your muscles into growing. New exercises every week, new equipment, new rep schemes, just so your body never adapts. The pitch is simple. Trick your muscles before they catch on, and size follows automatically. But the science shows something different. Your muscles don't get confused, they don't recognize an exercise by name, and they don't grow bored the way your mind does after the third week of squats. What they respond to is something far more mechanical, far more measurable, and far less mysterious than confusion implies. Start with what's actually happening inside a working muscle. A single muscle fiber is a long cell packed with smaller filaments that slide past each other, shortening the fiber and producing force. Stack thousands of these fibers together and you get a muscle. But here's the part most people never learn in a gym. Not every fiber fires at once. Your nervous system recruits them in order. Small, low-force motor units switch on first. Only when the demand gets heavy enough does your body call in the larger, higher threshold motor units, the ones with the greatest potential to grow. This recruitment order is called the size principle, first documented by physiologist Elwood Henneman in 1965, and it still holds up under modern testing equipment today. Why does that matter for you? Because a light weight, no matter how many times you switch exercises while using it, will never reach those high threshold fibers. There's no variation clever enough to substitute for genuine mechanical demand. The only thing that reliably recruits the fibers responsible for visible growth is sufficient tension, and tension comes from load relative to your strength, not from novelty. So where did muscle confusion come from? And why does it feel so convincing? Commercial programs popularized the term decades ago, built around the idea that variety itself was the active ingredient. And something does feel different when you switch movements. New exercises feel harder in the moment. You wake up sore in places you forgot you had muscles. That soreness gets mistaken for evidence, proof the program worked. But soreness is just localized inflammation from unfamiliar movement patterns. It's not a direct measurement of growth. And feeling challenged isn't the same as applying progressive tension to a muscle over time. Researcher Brad Schoenfeld, one of the most cited names in hypertrophy science, has spent years mapping the actual mechanisms behind muscle growth. His research points to three overlapping pathways: mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and a modest amount of muscle damage. Metabolic stress is the burn you feel during high rep sets, caused by the buildup of metabolic byproducts. Muscle damage is the microscopic disruption to fiber structure that triggers repair. But of the three, mechanical tension carries the most explanatory weight, and tension is built almost entirely through one method: progressively raising the demand on a muscle across weeks and months. That's the part muscle confusion quietly leaves out. In 2014, a research team led by Rodrigo Fonseca tested this directly. They split trained lifters into two groups. One group kept the same core exercises, but progressively increased their loads session after session. The other group constantly swapped exercises while keeping their loading flat, never building on a number from the week before. After the training block, the progressive loading group came out ahead in both strength and measured muscle thickness. Constant exercise variation, without a rising demand behind it, simply didn't keep pace with a far less exciting approach: doing the same lifts and adding weight. Think about what that finding actually means for your training. If you abandon an exercise every week or two, you never give your body a stable number to beat. You're permanently a beginner on something, which feels fresh, but it also means you can't add 5 pounds to a lift you've only done once. You can't track whether you got stronger, because there's nothing from last week to compare against. Muscle tissue adapts to demands it can measure and repeat. Randomness doesn't give it anything to measure. Here's the counterintuitive part. The very things that feel like progress, the soreness, the novelty, the sense of being shocked into a new state, are often the least efficient signals of growth. Familiarity with a lift isn't the enemy. Familiarity is what lets you load a movement harder, clean up your form, and notice small strength increases that compound over months instead of resetting every Monday. Your muscle protein synthesis, the biological process that rebuilds fiber after training, stays elevated for roughly 24 to 48 hours after a heavy session, sometimes longer. That repair process responds to repeated, compounding tension on a known movement pattern far more reliably than it responds to surprise. Does that mean variation has no place in your training at all? Not exactly. Variation still matters, just not the way the marketing sells it. Rotating an exercise every 6 to 12 weeks, once a movement plateaus or a joint needs a break, makes sense. Cycling rep ranges across a training block, spending a few weeks closer to failure and a few weeks lighter to recover, makes sense too. What doesn't hold up under testing is randomness for its own sake, switching exercises simply because the plan felt stale today. That kind of variation removes the one variable your muscle fibers actually need to grow, a stable baseline they can progressively overload. So what should you actually change starting with your next session? Pick a small set of foundational movements, exercises that let you load heavy and track numbers cleanly. A squat pattern, a hinge pattern, a horizontal press, a vertical pull. Keep these as the spine of your program for at least 4 to 6 weeks before considering a swap. Write down what you lift every session, even just in your phone. Each week, aim to add something small, one more rep, a few more pounds, or one additional controlled set. When progress genuinely stalls on a lift after weeks of honest effort, that's your signal to rotate it. A calendar reminder telling you it's time to confuse your body again is not a signal, it's marketing. This single shift, choosing progressive overload over constant novelty, is the difference between a program that feels exciting in the moment and one that actually rebuilds your muscle fibers thicker and stronger over months. Your nervous system doesn't care how many different exercises you've cycled through this year. It cares whether the tension on the muscle this week exceeded the tension from last week. You don't need 50 exercises to build muscle, and you don't need a new plan every Monday morning. You definitely don't need to outsmart your own body, because your body was never confused to begin with. What it needs is patience, consistency, and a number on the bar that keeps climbing, even slowly, even when it feels boring. The myth promised growth through chaos. The science points somewhere quieter, more repeatable, and far less marketable. You walk into the gym holding a program that once promised to confuse your muscles into growing, and now you know what the real promise should have been all along. Lift a little more than you did last time, and let that simple, unglamorous demand do the work.